The voice of Husker Nation is on the air. This is Hail Varsity Radio. Insight, opinion, expertise, along with the biggest names talking Nebraska sports. Join in with the show at 402-489-1240 or 1-800-825-5865. Now, here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt and Elijah Herbel.
Welcome to it. Fridays here at Hail Varsity Radio, presented by Currency for all of your equipment financing needs. Go Currency. Elijah Herbel here filling in for Chris Schmidt, joined by a special guest in the studio. You read him with Hail Varsity Magazine and HailVarsity.com. It's Brady Oltmans joining us here for a Friday edition as Schmidt's on the road down in Kansas City. He'll return for the Saturday morning edition of Hail Varsity Radio tomorrow morning, 7:30 to 9 a.m. We'll tell you a little bit more about that here in just a second. But first, Brady, it's so lovely to have you in studio. You got to tell me, is this your first time ever doing like a full radio show like this?
Well, first time doing it with you guys. I think I've palled around back in Wyoming, or at least previous sports coverage stops doing full radio. But I like my 15, 20 minutes with you guys so much on Friday afternoons. I figured, why not we make it a full 2 hours?
2 hours is going to be something.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what.
Everybody, if you hold in there and you listen to the whole thing, we'll probably have a present or something, or a parting gift for you at the end.
Brady, I guess we have you on every single Friday, but now that you got a full show, I think we have a chance to give you your full stage. Tell us a little bit about yourself. I mean, I think we know the small town history, the history in Wyoming, now in the big city of Lincoln. It's tongue in cheek. Just I guess take us through what led you to here today hosting Hail Varsity Radio with me.
Perfect. All right. For those who don't know, I'm actually a Nebraska native. Essentially full-time. I grew up on a farm outside of Nelson, Nebraska, and went to Lawrence Nelson High School, graduated from there, and came to UNL straight from there. And from there, I kind of got a job working at the newspaper here, and did that for part-time while working on the sports desk and filling in, doing different duties, covering high school sports, Nebraska soccer, and a little bit of Nebraska football before I got my first full-time job covering high school sports and rodeo and junior college sports, and not men's basketball and football out in Wyoming, and really enjoyed it there. Loved it for the first couple of years I was there. And then, once COVID happened, it kind of changed everything. Did a little feature work, kept doing that, but kind of helped out on the news side, and then just kind of helped doing news side stuff while also doing freelance sports work for the next, I guess it was about 2 years maybe in total. And then I was like, sports are back on. I want to be a part of it. I want to be here, and moved back to Nebraska. And this opportunity came in, so I joined up last August, after extensively watching Nebraska football since about 1994, if I remember correctly. So I'm still new to the gig, but I'm not new to Nebraska football or new to Lincoln whatsoever, having lived here like 8 years in total before the job. So it's just nice to be back in the familiar and with all of you guys.
Brady, it's good to have you in today. We got a fun show planned today, as Brady's going to try to earn his stripes, maybe get another opportunity down the road to come back and join us again. In about 25 minutes coming up here, I should say about 20 minutes coming up, Jacob Padilla, Hail Varsity staff writer, is going to be joining us to talk Keisei Tominaga, Trey Alexander, his day up at Millard North today watching some of the high school basketball teams. That's 4:25 p.m. for Jacob. A little bit later this hour, we'll get into the Hail Varsity Yearbook, the cover release today. Brady's going to give us some insight into what went down in that process, getting Gabe Irvin on the cover, as well as some things to expect in the Hail Varsity Yearbook. And then coming up in hour two, we'll have Bill Doleman, the pride of Fairbury, joining us as he wants to talk Indy 500.
I'm really excited to hear about that.
He texted me specifically. I'm like, Bill, we good for our usual 505 spot on Friday? And he goes, as long as we can talk Indy 500. I was like, okay. So
I've heard some Bill driving stories. I'm excited to see where this one goes.
Yeah, he raced against somebody in the Indy 500. I don't want to spoil his story at all, but we'll get into that at 505. Bill Doleman talking Indy 500 before we get into some stuff on the SEC, Big 12 expansion, and brunch and Boulder. So all that's coming up in hour two with Bill Doleman. We'll get Brady's take on recruiting in hour two as well. And time permitting, maybe we'll get into my Nuggets a little bit as they take a 1-0 series lead over the Miami Heat last night. I know y'all want to hear about Husker football, but I got the mic in front of my face.
Yeah.
I'm the one running the show right now. Like, I'm going to talk about Husker football Nuggets basketball just a little bit. But first, we start off with Husker football and the former conference of Nebraska, the Big 12. That's my segue from Husker football into something else. Like, we're going to start off with Husker football and then move slightly away, the 3 degrees of separation or whatever. And the Big 12, as they had 3 days of spring meetings in West Virginia a little bit earlier. Brett Yormark on Friday said that the leadership in the Big 12 Conference is aligned on pursuing expansion this summer if the right opportunities emerge. This is on the heels of all the stuff coming out in the past about 72 hours about Colorado maybe wanting to join the Big 12, leave the Pac-12 once the TV media rights deal is up. Obviously, there'd be no exit fee for Colorado, and some inside sources have said the interest is mutual between the Big 12 and Colorado, so that could be moving. But Commissioner Yormark saying the conference is aligned in terms of expansion in that their goal is a coast-to-coast type conference, which is where college football has been moving. The SEC, the Big 10, now maybe the Big 12, all trying to get into a coast-to-coast type situation. Yormark, the quote, "We have a plan. As I've said all along, we have an appetite to be a national conference in our makeup from coast to coast, and we do believe the upside of basketball moving forward as a collective group. That being said, we love our current composition, love the 4 new schools that are coming in next month. However, if the opportunity presents itself to create value, we will pursue it." Brady, your thoughts here on where the Big 12 might be going in terms of expansion. We know that in terms of the Pac-12 and the Big 12, it's a very much a do-or-die time. If you don't get richer, you're going to die. It's get rich or die trying right now is the theme for both the Pac-12 and the Big 12. If they don't expand, if they don't get some new member institutions, you're going to be left behind whenever the Power 5 becomes a Power 3 or a Power 4, which that's the direction we're moving in.
Yeah, and you could say, running with that theme, many men have left the Big 12 over the years.
That was good.
Thank you. Personal thoughts, I thought the Big 12 expansion recently with these 4 new schools coming in has been really interesting. And I would, if I was a film critic, I'd give it 2 thumbs up basically because they're interesting football programs. They have strong basketball pedigrees, and the Big 12 is an incredible basketball conference. I mean, basketball plays some factor, but college football runs the show. I think we can all kind of acknowledge that. And especially with the TV rights deals, it seems like the Big 12 is in a much better predicament than the Pac-12, both in years and then buyers. They have a lot more appealing markets. I mean, the Texas market especially is good, and then you throw in Oklahoma City, and you throw in even Morgantown, Kansas City, all of that. I mean, that all makes sense. And I just think it's, especially with USC and UCLA leaving, and then I don't want to say antipathy, but it just seems like the Pac-12's move to even knee-jerk reaction to add people has been kind of like tongue-in-cheek. It's been like they haven't been out in front of this enough to really send a strong message to its member institutions that says, hey, we're here, we're rallying the troops, we're trying to get everybody, on the same side here. And I think at this point, you are smart if you're a member institution, if you're a Colorado, if you're even a Utah or someplace and you're exploring options elsewhere. It makes a lot of sense. And to be honest, the Big 12, they've got a lot of momentum going forward. I mean, sure, you lose Texas and Oklahoma, but right away they've got a plan, with some exciting new members to kind of refortify their line and shift identity a little bit while still maintaining a strong competitiveness. And shoot, you just saw, Kansas State and TCU play an exciting game in your Big 12 championship. Neither of those are leaving and going anywhere. So it's, to me, it makes a whole lot of sense, and it's really exciting as we see the inevitable college football landscape change a little bit more. Those are moves that make a lot of sense to me.
And obviously, if they're going coast to coast, they've added UCF. So there's a Florida East Coast school. Houston keeps the door to Texas open along with Baylor and TCU. BYU starts to get into that mountain range. And then you have Cincinnati, which is more of the Rust Belt, if you will.
Yeah.
So you have a good amount of the country. What you're lacking is the West Coast. So I wonder what the number you come to is probably 2 or 4. You're at 12 right now. There's a lot of conferences at 14 right now. 16 seems to be what the future of college football is going to be in terms of conference numbers. Eventually, one of those Power 5s is going to go away. And right now, it looks like Pac-12 might be the most likely option in terms of a conference that you're going to go raid. So the 4, Colorado would make sense to me, as we kind of laid out yesterday, where they're at right now in the Pac-12. They don't bring much for the Pac-12 in terms of TV media rights, but you can parlay that hype around Deion Sanders, and they have a good basketball program right now. You can bring them into the Big 12, and I think you can make the Big 12 more sellable in that way. It's the historical nature of Colorado being in the Big 12.
Yeah.
I look at Arizona and Arizona State, both being potential options. Utah, I wonder about Washington and Oregon. What's their willingness going to be? We've heard the smoke around them going to the Big 10, and it's been no more than smoke.
Right.
But Washington and Oregon, I think, are going to be two prime candidates to be leaving the Pac-12 should that Pac-12 conference lose its Power 5 status. They have to go pluck some other teams to try to stick around. I think there's good options from the Pac-12 to go join the Big 12. The question in my mind is, whenever I hear coast to coast, do you have any thoughts of going and trying to raid the ACC?
Yeah, I mean, that would make a whole lot of sense too, especially for the Big 12 if you're already getting UCF in, and it seems like a foregone conclusion that the SEC would reach out to like a Florida State and Miami. But, you and I talked a little bit earlier about it, like at least send out the feeler, at least, take the temperature of the room there. Plus you've got Virginia. If you want to add to your strong basketball conference, check North Carolina, check Wake Forest, check all of Tobacco Road. And because, especially if you've got that nice already ingrained West Virginia, the Appalachia, and even in the Smoky Mountains area, like you can take the temperature there a little bit, and then all of a sudden you're like, okay, so these are budding football programs that seem like they're under strong leadership, especially with Duke and Mike Elko and what they were able to do last year. North Carolina, I think that will still work even after Drake May is gone, and it should still be sustainable after Mac Brown retires or when he retires in a couple of years here. That seems like there's a good infrastructure there. So it makes sense to me if you want to go that route and look at the ACC, because those, I mean, we heard it, last week with the kind of news coming out that some ACC schools were like, hey, listen, like Boston College was among one of them, like, hey, listen, we're worth more than what we're getting paid here, which is probably fair, with like your Clemsons and things, but like also your TV deal goes for another 12 years, you know what I mean? Like that's tough. That's really tough. So it just makes sense if you want to go that route, and then maybe picking up like, I don't know, some I call them mid-majors just because the basketball brain in me, but some group of fives along the way. Like it doesn't all have to be the major schools in the Power 5, but like you could get a really good conference footprint built out there just by looking at those schools.
So Brady Oltmans with us here, Hail Varsity Radio. We have a question in from the stream. Brennan chimes in, do you wish Nebraska was still in the Big 12? It's not a fresh topic that we have had in the show. I feel like it's been a recurring theme over the past, even before I joined the show. It's probably got to be the last 10 years. Do you wish Nebraska was still in the Big 12? I think it's a good point of conversation today just to show where Nebraska is positioned in college football right now, because I just saw the numbers today that came out from, I believe it was Dennis Dodd, saying the payouts for the Big 12 this year will be $44 million per school, which is a healthy chunk of change. But whenever you compare that to the Big 10, where Nebraska is positioned within the Big 10 conference, expecting conference media payouts to be somewhere in the range of $100 million over the course of the next 10 years with this new media rights deal, which we can get into the media rights deal and Kevin Warren's role in that, what it's going to actually end up looking like, how much it's going to cost schools in the long run. We don't quite know right now, but compare those two, where the Big 12 is at $44 million per year compared to Nebraska, which we'd assume is going to be in the range of $100 million per year. I don't think nostalgia is worth $50 million a year, in my opinion.
Yeah. I'm kind of with you, because you got to look at it on two different planes. There's a competitive side, which obviously Nebraska has played for one Big 10 championship, and the results just haven't been there. I understand that. I understand that the competition might be a little bit easier in the Big 12 rather than playing Ohio State, Michigan, even Michigan State before the kind of skid that they've been on recently. I completely understand that, and I empathize with that. But the recent success or lack thereof of Nebraska football has not been conference dependent. Like it is just what it is. And I've said it time and time again, every program goes through lulls. Like Ohio State might be like a little asterisk to it, because there's just Ohio State just seems like a different breed. But even Alabama, before they go on this big run, they had those lull years where people were kind of like, what's wrong? The years of Bear Bryant are far gone. Can you believe this program? And then obviously Nick Saban comes in and cleans it up. from a financial standpoint, because that's what all this is about, it just makes a ton more sense to be in the Big Ten. Plus, you look at how conference landscape has shifted. Nebraska is much better situated safety-wise, and it's assured in its future financially, conference-wise, competitiveness-wise, to be in the Big Ten than it would be like clawing or trying to be one of those suitors in a possible Big 12 reshaping as it goes through like a third era, a third iteration, because I mean, Colorado leaving, A&M leaving, Oklahoma and Texas leaving, like, yeah, you'd be better. But, like, again, would you rather be kind of fighting with Iowa State or fighting with Kansas State for Big 12 supremacy, or would you rather be playing Ohio State and Michigan for an assured spot in the playoff? There's two different ways of looking at it, but I think time has kind of validated Nebraska's risky move, over a decade ago.
And I think one thing that flies under the radar whenever you talk about the Big Ten is the new stuff going on campus, a shiny, brand new football facility, the potential for some South Stadium renovation coming up to give you a better fan experience. Nebraska has that money, even in the NIL era, whenever you think about the fact that donors, they're spending their money on the athletes now, on the kids. When you're talking $10, $15 million a year, we don't know the numbers, but that seems to be the going rate in NIL. That's going to the athletes now. That's coming out of your pocket. Where is that money going to be coming from now? And Nebraska has it from the Big Ten. As I laid out, you're getting potentially $40, $50 million more per season because of the fact that you're in the Big Ten. Whenever you look at, maybe there's $15 million a year you're losing because the donors are giving that to the athletes instead of the university. Well, it doesn't matter with the new Big Ten media rights deal. Nebraska is very well positioned financially moving forward, despite the fact they just paid a huge contract buyout to Scott Frost after doing it to Mike Riley and Bo Pelini. Nebraska is still fine financially, and that's because they're in the Big Ten Conference.
And they haven't even won yet.
That's true. Jacob Padilla is with us next. It's Hail Varsity Radio, presented by Currency.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Rolling through a Friday edition of Hail Varsity Radio. It's Elijah Herbel and Brady Oltmans today filling in for Chris Schmidt down on the road in Kansas City. We'll hear from Schmitty tomorrow morning as a part of the Saturday morning edition of Hail Varsity Radio, 7:30 to 9. We welcome in now staff writer for Hail Varsity Magazine. He's had a busy day today. Jacob Padilla joining us here on a Friday edition. And Jacob, you got to tell me a little about the hoops you saw today. You were up at Millard North. A lot of great teams in action. I saw Bellevue West and Omaha West Side going at it. I was following along on your Twitter feed. Tell us a little about what you saw today and then the summer hoops that you're taking in.
Yeah, this is kind of the annual kickoff or tip-off, I guess, to the summer or the June of high school hoops at the North Hoop Fest. So good mixed teams there. Got to see a lot of battle. Bellevue West Side, saw Millard North, saw Creighton Prep, saw Gretna. So a lot of the best teams in the Metro kind of starting things off here, playing against each other.
Jacob Padilla is with us here at Hail Varsity Radio. And Jacob, how similar were these teams? I know we're going to get to Husker Basketball here in a second, but how similar are these teams to what you think we'll actually see once November rolls around and the high school hoop scene gets going? Is this a chance to get some guys some action, see what they've got now before they maybe make a move up to varsity? Are these pretty much the teams that you think we're going to see come October and November?
Yeah, I mean, in June, it's always kind of hit or miss depending on who's there. You've got some multi-sport kids that'll be there once the season comes that maybe like didn't get a look. I know W West was missing a couple guys as well that'll be in the mix for them. So June is about kind of seeing, all right, we're making moves versus, all right, what does this team look like as a whole? Seeing which guys that maybe were JV last year that are going to be rotation players, or guys that were maybe off the bench last year that are stepping into starting roles and looking to kind of make that next step for their programs and kind of a breakout year. That's kind of more what June is. Like you saw today, I think Creighton Prep lost to Gretna. Millard North, I think, blew out Central or something like that. And then Prep beat Millard North. So it's kind of game to game. Never quite know what you're going to get. Like a lot of mentioned, I think will be very much going to be in the mix to Lincoln at the end of the winter.
Jacob, you're breaking up with us just a little bit on the stream here. I'll give it about another 30 seconds and see if we can get some of these connection issues solved. If not, we may have to give you a phone call if that's all right with you. But quickly, we'll go one more thought here. We can still mostly hear what you're trying to say, and I think it might be starting to clear up now as I fill some time. So what you're essentially saying is take the results today with a grain of salt. Got it? Can do. Jacob Padilla is with us here, Hail Varsity Radio. Jacob, let's move to Husker Hoops and the big news of the week. Keisei Tominaga, he's returning for another season. I think in terms of what this could mean for Husker basketball, it definitely improves the ceiling for the 2023-2024 season. I want to get your reaction, what it means, Keisei coming back, and what this Husker basketball team's ceiling could be next season with him in the lineup.
Yeah, it kind of gives them a chance to build off of what saw last year, as opposed to more or less starting entirely over. You get Keisei back. Hopefully he can pick up where he left off. Now you've got, kind of your go-to scorers, a guy that basketball down the stretch of the season, that knows the systems, how to get his looks off, play with some of these other guys. That's 13 points a game, 20 points a game in the last 9, come back to build around. And then you can slot in guys like Bryce Williams and Rink Mass and those guys around Keisei as kind of one of your knowns, the guy that can rely on to go out and face the floor, make smart cuts to the basket, and just kind of give you a more better offense. I think if you didn't bring him back, then it was more or less going to be a team. Some rules coming back, but you losing Walker, those were kind of the faces of your program, that your primary playmakers. Now you get Keisei back, the guy everybody knows, everybody loves, and now you can fit in those new around them. You can see Ramel Lloyd Jr. coming off the red shirt, slotting in there as well. And so it feels like more of a moving as opposed to starting over. Got Keisei back.
Jacob, we're going to reconnect with you here via the phone lines. We got most of what you had there. There's a couple break-in and outs. We want to have the highest listening quality, so I'll give you a call here in 2 seconds. While we do that, Brady, your reaction, Keisei Tominaga's return for Nebraska basketball.
Well, I pretty much echo what Jacob said. I mean, it really sounds like it's just that's a big one for a Nebraska program that kind of lost, like a lot of schools, lost somebody through the portal, at least, a prominent player. Keisei became such a great player at the right time, and people really loved and resonated with him. So I think this one, obviously he brings something to the court, but there's also something about, like, he became the fan favorite among Husker fans towards the end there, along with like Sam Griesel and everybody, and everybody like that, Sam Hoiberg. So it's a big thing for the fan base to rally behind him to get him back.
I have Jacob's phone number memorized, so we got him quickly onto the phone lines here. We welcome back Jacob Padilla onto the show. And Jake, we got most of what you said there about Keisei and his return. I want to get into just what you think Fred Hoiberg and his mission next season needs to be. We've talked about it plenty, that Fred Hoiberg needs to have his best season as Husker head coach next year in order to keep his job. We're not quite sure what that means, but I think based on the roster he has right now, these expectations going into the season on what the team can be are rightfully as high as they've ever been for Hoiberg.
Yeah, I think what you need to do is just kind of keep showing forward progress, that they're getting better. They're kind of filling out this roster with putting together a deeper team, a team that can compete consistently in the Big Ten. Obviously going to need a little bit better luck than he's had throughout his career, because, obviously the record isn't what you want to see, but he's had a lot of things go against him that weren't necessarily in his control. Obviously, we know kind of what a disaster the 2020 season, 2021, the COVID season was. We know last year with the guys in and out of with Derek Walker suspended at the start, and then the injuries over the second half of the season. It's just he's had a lot of things kind of get in the way of trying to build up his program and get the team playing like he wants to. So hopefully a little bit better luck with health. We can see them get better, as opposed to last year was kind of up and down, where he figured something out and then the injuries hit and he had to start over and figure a different way, and they're able to kind of get some success down the stretch. What you want to see is kind of a consistent identity, something that you can recruit to, something that can lead to sustained success. And I don't necessarily know you going, you got to be an NCAA tournament team, but you can't be a team that's knocked out of the mix early on. You've got to be competing for some kind of postseason down the stretch of the year, whatever that may be. and try to climb your way out of the bottom portion of the Big Ten. If you win, find that elusive Big Ten tournament win that Nebraska's been searching for a while. That's why Keisei coming back is big, because it does allow you to, like I said, kind of build off of last season and carry some of that success over to this next year and try to kind of push it forward, as opposed to starting over once again, which has kind of been the story of the Hoiberg era so far. Every year is basically a completely different team. This year, you got a lot of newcomers that will play important roles, but you also have some important guys coming back that know what Hoiberg wants to do and know what their role is on this team and how they can have success. So that's going to be really important. That's what he's got to do. He's got to show that, hey, we're getting better. That's the kind of the bottom line. We got to show that this program is moving forward in order to kind of make this thing keep going.
Yeah, Jacob, just to that point, it's because it's one thing I noticed when Keisei announced he was coming back after working out with the Pacers. He's done NBA workouts. He's been at that level. What does this do? And you mentioned all the momentum that they had building up, shortly before the Big Ten tournament last year, and they had so much trajectory built up. What does Keisei returning do to embolden that momentum for those new guys, or even recruits, or possible additional portal players to like boost up the allure, I guess, for lack of a better term, of Nebraska basketball, and say, look, this is a thing that you want to be on the roller coaster now as this thing shoots up. How much does Keisei's decision factor into that?
Yeah, I think you mentioned how much of a fan favorite he became. Like, he is the draw for Nebraska basketball right now, especially like early in the year. People are coming back to the Keisei show and then learn about everybody else. See what Bryce Williams can do. See the local kid and Josiah Alec and how hard he plays and all the hustle plays and all that type of thing. He is a draw, and he's I think Hoiberg talked about too, just kind of, he's fun to be around, like just his personality and just the kind of the excitement, the joy that he plays with, the how fired up he gets. Or even talk about like there's kind of a give and take there, where sometimes he has to try to calm him down a little bit and get him back on track. But it's just good kind of having that personality, a guy that just has that much fun when he's playing. You hear about his teammates all last year. You hear about Sam Griesel talking about Keisei and some of these guys, just kind of what he is for the program and how fun he is to play with. And talked to Ramel Lloyd Jr. at the OSA yesterday and talked about, he's excited. He chose a red shirt, so didn't get to play with a lot of the guys that he became tight with that moved on since, but excited to have Keisei back. And the point guard's best friend is a guy who's going to knock down shots, and that's certainly what Keisei is there to do for this program.
Jake, we might have to keep you for another segment. I'm not sure if you're available for that, but we need to get your thoughts on Trey Alexander. We're up against a hard break. If it doesn't work, that's fine.
I'm good.
Okay, perfect. Quickly here before we get you out, about 30 seconds. Last thought on Husker basketball. I saw on Twitter you've been doing a film study on Josiah Alec. Let us know the update on that. What's coming from you here soon with that film study? Yeah,
that'll be up this weekend. I've completed all the clips. I've taken all my notes. Now I just got to throw it together into the story, and I think Nebraska fans will have a lot of fun kind of reading through that, watching the clips, because, like I said, dude plays hard, and he does a lot of little things for a program.
Is there a comparison for Josiah Alec that you think is out there, maybe former Husker NBA guy? Who do you think he plays like?
That's a tough one heading into a hard break. Let me think about that. Might have something to come back.
The name that comes to mind for me, Jacob, and you can stew on this while we go to break, Kenneth Fareed. I haven't seen as much film study on Josiah Alec as I'm sure you have, but the clips I've seen, long hair, the explosiveness, the glue guy aspect, Kenneth Fareed seems like the guy that comes to mind first for me. Jacob, we'll let you stew on that, though, and we'll return with more on Jacob Padilla as we get into Creighton basketball, Trey Alexander's return, and maybe a thought or two on the Nuggets. Hail Varsity continues after the break as we're presented by Currency.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Rolling through a Friday edition, it's Hail Varsity Radio. Elijah Herbel and Brady Oltmans in for Chris Schmidt today as we welcome back to the show Jacob Padilla, kind enough to join us for another segment. He's had a couple minutes to stew. So, Jacob, I asked the question to you. Kenneth Faried, is that a fair comparison, or am I just a biased Nuggets fan?
Well, I think he's there's definitely some similarities in like just playing style and, like you said, the hair and the hustle. Josiah's a little bit more skilled, I think, than that, and a little bit more versatile. Because he can, like, if he gets the shot right, he shot 36% at UMKC, and last year the shot kind of abandoned him. Confidence is gone. I know he wasn't 100% healthy for stretches at New Mexico last year, but he's a guy that can defend multiple positions. I mean, you look at New Mexico last year, they had him guarding basically the other team's best player, whether it was a wing or a forward. So he provides a little bit more versatility than that. He's not a guy that's going to go get you a bucket necessarily, but he can score in the post. He can cut to the basket. He can step out and knock down an open jump shot here and there. So he's just kind of like a connector piece. And I still haven't been able to come up with a name of like, oh, this is exactly who he plays like, because he does so many little things. Like, I don't know, all right, this is his game. It's like he does a lot of a little versus something, or a little of a lot of things versus being really great in any one area or two.
So I'll go biased Nuggets fan again, somewhere between Aaron Gordon and Kenneth Faried. There it is.
Yeah, something like that. I think that's an interesting combination of a player. But yeah, it fits.
Jacob Padilla is with us here at Hail Varsity Radio. And Brady, got anything else on Husker basketball before we move to Creighton?
No, I'm giddy with how he no-sold all of your Nuggets fandom that you were able to slide in there.
It's that time of year. I've been excited. Well, Jacob, let's turn to Creighton in the news. We're on to Trey Alexander. As similar story to Keisei. He withdraws his name from the NBA draft on Wednesday, and he's going to be returning for his final season of eligibility at Creighton. And I guess similar question to Keisei. What's your reaction first and foremost? I don't think this necessarily comes as a surprise, but then also, what does this do for Creighton's ceiling? They were a team that had a lot of expectations last season, and I look at it now this offseason. I think they're going to have very similar high expectations. Is Final Four the expectation for Creighton this season after what they did last year?
Definitely the goal, and it's a realistic one. I just, as a fan, alumnus of Creighton, like, excited by the chance to see what this team is going to look like and to see all these guys, the newcomers, kind of blend in with the guys they've got coming back. I think this roster fits together a little bit better than last year's. Where, I mean, Ryan Nembhard and Arthur Kluma are good players, but there was a little bit of like, I don't necessarily know that all those guys, like, some of the strengths, some of the things they like to do overlapped a little bit, and weren't necessarily always the most complementary. I think you look at this, the four guys coming back, plus kind of whoever of that bench emerges to round out that starting five. You've got a chance to see these guys really fit together well and play off of each other. Just because they're going all in on the floor spacing, you're going to have a bunch of 40% three-point shooters, like guys capable of shooting at that rate. And you look at Trey Alexander and Stephen Ashworth and Baylor Shireman, all guys that can shoot 40% from three, that can knock down shots off the ball, and also initiate, can run pick and rolls, and can set each other up so they can get really good looks. You swing it from one side to the other, and they're attacking you again with a guy that is just as good as the initial action. So they're going to be really hard to defend, especially you plug in some more floor spacing at that four spot, like an Isaac Trout or Mason Miller. If those guys kind of take a step forward here and can be that guy to space the floor consistently, that's going to be a lot of room to operate for Trey Alexander and ball screens for Ryan Kalkbrenner in the post and rolling to the rim. Ashford's a really good ball screen player as well. So I'm just excited to see kind of what this looks like with all those guys on the court at the same time, because I think it's got a chance to be pretty special.
Yeah, Jacob, it dawns on me to think it's no secret you want to have your best players back and have that cohesion and those reps together playing again. But when you look at how the Final Four played out, how the NCAA tournament played out in the Final Four, 3 of the 4 aren't blue blood basketball programs, are all Cinderellas in their own rights, and Creighton obviously wasn't able to make it that far. How does McDermott kind of, I don't even want to say compensate, but how do you adjust or think that adjustment is made in order to get there after you've just seen other schools who start out in the same position as you or kind of in the same pack as you also kind of get bounced out at different points in the tournament while underdogs succeed and go that far? How do you kind of adjust for that in order to get over the hump and get to that goal of the Final Four?
Yeah, I think you saw them, again, with the additions they made, kind of get back to the identity that they've created during their rise up through the Big East, the kind of the let it fly, the shooters all over the place. They didn't necessarily have that last year, and ultimately, like you look at their biggest losses, at some of their toughest losses, it was because they just could not knock down shots. You didn't have a lot of pure shooters on that team last year, and guy like Baylor Shireman coming in, it's hard playing in the Big East for the first year. There's been an adjustment period for some of the best shooters to ever come through Creighton. Mitch Ballack, Tyshawn Alexander, these guys, their first year on campus, Marcus Zagorowski, like all these guys, they weren't 40% three-point shooters out of the gate. Like the Big East is a tough league, but you've seen that jump from year 2 to year 3, or from year 1 to year 2 and year 2 to year 3. So I'd expect an improvement from Baylor Shireman now, kind of knowing what he's dealing with and having a year in the system. And Ashworth is a 40+% three-point shooter. And Trey Alexander, 40+% three-point shooter last year. And I mentioned those kind of Miller and Trout and guys that are going to have potential to be four spacers as well. So that was the one thing I think you're kind of seeing them go all in on the three-point shooting while still trying to kind of hold on to that defensive identity that Kalkbrenner gives you. Like you're going to win a lot of games if you're a 40% three-point shooting team with the rim protection that Kalkbrenner provides there on the back line, and then the rim pressure on offense too, with him rolling to the rim, because it just puts you in such a bad spot where you have to make decisions. Where are you going to leave Baylor Shireman wide open on the backside to tag the roll man? Or are you going to let Kalkbrenner roll to the rim? If you tag and then rotate, now he's kicking the ball to Stephen Ashworth, who's another 40% shooter. So like there are just so many different ways that Creighton's going to be able to attack you, and I think that's kind of what they're doing to try to make this next step. Last year, they were just kind of good basketball players that grow together. Now this year, they're like going all in on that identity, the let it fly. We're going to shoot the lights out, but we're still going to be tough on defense and make you compete and work to get everything that you want on your offensive end of the floor.
Jacob, last thought here, 10 seconds. Can anybody stop Nikola Jokic?
No, I think at boredom at this point.
Good answer. Good answer.
Yeah, the Nuggets are just unreal to watch, and I kind of expected 4 or 5 game series going into this just based on what I saw from the previous round for both.
There is Jacob Padilla joining us, a Friday edition of Hail Varsity Radio. Jacob, we appreciate you sticking around for a second segment, and we hope you enjoy the rest of your weekend. All right, bud?
Yep, sorry about the cutting out beforehand, but hopefully most of my points got through.
Oh, we appreciate you joining us, Jacob. We'll talk to you next week.
Bye.
Here's Jacob Padilla joining us. We'll talk a little about the Hail Varsity Yearbook coming your way after the break here at Hail Varsity Radio.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
It's a Friday edition of Hail Varsity Radio. Elijah Herbel and Brady Oltmans today in for Chris Schmidt. We'll hear from Chris Schmidt a little bit more on tomorrow as we have the Saturday morning edition of Hail Varsity Radio, 7:30 to 9, streaming online wherever you find the live streaming version of Hail Varsity Radio. That's the Hail Varsity YouTube page, the Hail Varsity Twitter page, at HVarsity Radio is where you follow that. Not only to get the show, but also get the daily show lineup and some of the best clips from Hail Varsity Radio, and then the KFOR Twitter and KFOR Facebook page as well, our home station here in Lincoln. Two other great places to find it. And if you catch us in podcast form, catch us after the fact. We appreciate you too. We'll cut out the commercial breaks from the show and we'll get that posted up on YouTube. So check that out, the Hail Varsity YouTube page, where you can find the full show in video form with no commercial breaks. We give that service to you. We cut out the commercial breaks. Make sure to save you some time. Your time is valuable. You get the show in about an hour and 20 minutes every single day, so we encourage you to check it out there. Brady, before we get out this hour, exciting day today for Hail Varsity. The cover photo for the Hail Varsity Football Yearbook has been released. Gabe Irvin's on the cover, and got some inside knowledge that you were there on site today. I guess not today, a little bit earlier this month, as the yearbook photos were going down, and you got to watch the whole process. Tell us a little about that.
Man, it's so fun. It's always so fun. Our great leader, Aaron Sorensen, kind of led the pack. We chose Gabe for the cover, just kind of based on, he's got a really cool story. Drake Keeler's has a great feature on him that'll be a part of the yearbook. His story kind of symbolizes the change that's kind of happening here. So we thought that was interesting. And then getting out there with Eric Francis, our photographer, and Gabe was kind enough to give us, like an hour of his time, and we're taking pictures all over at Memorial Stadium for the cover. And you can find it now on Twitter. We're pumping it out everywhere. I get a little smile on my face seeing all the players react to it and get hyped up and share it on Instagram and everything like that. That's super cool. It turned out great. I think it's a great piece and a great thing that we always do. I mean, it takes a lot of work and effort to put all these things together, and I get it. But how cool is the yearbook and the magazine, and something that because I know when I take it over, my parents have a subscription, but I'll still bring extra copies over, and they've got it out on their table. And when guests come over, my nieces and nephew come over, or their friends from, that want to stop down and see their house on the farm, they just come over and they leaf through it and everything like that. It's a super cool thing. And to have the art and that actual eye-catching piece to it is super cool. And thankful for the Nebraska Athletic Department and the players that were involved. Chief Borders, Brian Buccini were also involved in the shoot. They didn't make the cover, but they were involved in the fun day out there. So it's super cool to have everybody else involved there. And again, shout out to Gabe for giving us a little bit over an hour of his time. We took a little bit extra because we had some ideas popping around, and I think everybody's going to be excited. You can see the cover now. Everybody's going to be really excited when they leaf through that cover later in the month.
Yeah, go check it out at Hail Varsity on Twitter, at Hail Varsity on Instagram. You can see the cover art there as Gabe Irvin and Eric Francis, a great tag team there to make that cover happen. It's awesome, and we have an offer for you. HailVarsity.com/offer for a monthly or yearly subscription to Hail Varsity magazine. So go check it out there. The deadline has been extended to Sunday night at midnight. If you get your subscription, and then you will guarantee yourself a copy to the Hail Varsity Yearbook. And again, HailVarsity.com/offer is where you get the offer from Hail Varsity Radio to get yourself a discounted subscription. We're going to catch up with Bill Doleman, Bill in his usual Friday 5:05 time slot. That's coming your way after the break here on Hail Varsity Radio.
The voice of Husker Nation is on the air. This is Hail Varsity Radio. Insight, opinion, expertise, along with the biggest names talking Nebraska sports. Join in with the show at 402-489-1240 or 1-800-825-5865. Now, here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt and Elijah Herbel.
Back in on a Friday, it's hour 2. It's Hail Varsity Radio. We're presented by Currency for all of your equipment financing needs. Go Currency. Elijah Herbel and Brady Oltmans with you on a Friday. I should say special guest Brady Oltmans, kind enough to sit in with me here on a Friday, a yearbook release day, at least the cover for Hail Varsity magazine. So Brady's giving us some insight there. We're talking some Husker football, and we're going to get into that with Bill Doleman as Bill joins us from the great state of Florida. He has told me he just crossed over the big bridge in Tampa. I don't know what that means. I don't know if that's an innuendo, but we go to Bill Doleman now joining us from the great state of Florida. Bill, how are we doing today?
Well, I'm doing quite well. I'm in Florida, for Pete's sake. How do you think I'm doing? But yeah, I'm crossing over the iconic Tampa Bridge as we speak right now.
What makes it? I've never heard of the Tampa Bridge. I can't lie.
Is this a Bill Doleman special? What's going on here? What is this Tampa Bridge?
Have we lost Bill? We may have lost Bill. I've looked up a picture, and the Tampa Bay Bridge is quite impressive.
Are you there now?
Yeah, we're here.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, well, apparently there's no cell service on said bridge.
This is the Sunshine Skyway Bridge. Is that the one you're referring to?
That's it.
It's got like a big arch in the middle. I can't lie. I looked up a picture. It is quite impressive. I did not know this existed in Tampa Bay.
Well, that's where I am, and congratulations to Brady on that on the promotion after giving that 2-hour show that he did like 2-3 weeks ago. We're talking about recruiting.
Oh, the reception's cut out.
Certainly
again.
paid off to go sit in with the big chair today. So congratulations on that.
You know, you work your way up sometimes. You know, we all got to put in our hours elsewhere to work our way up the ladder.
Bill, let's start this off here today. You told me that the only reason that you would hop on today is if we asked you about the Indy 500 to get your reaction. So we're going to start with the Indy 500. We start with Joseph Newgarden. You had a story there. I need to get. I guess let's segmentize it first. Let's first start out here with your reaction to the Indy 500 as it went down last weekend, obviously in Indianapolis. What were your thoughts, Bill? I know you're a big Indianapolis 500 fan.
A big race fan. It was, you know what? After the split that took place about 25 years ago, that the Indy 500 this year was the one that finally brought the series back to where it should be, which is the greatest race series in the world. I know people are all enamored with Formula One, but you know there's just not the racing and the passing that you have in IndyCar. So that was spectacular. To see 325,000 people back in the seats again, jamming the place, is just a testament to the great leadership of Roger Penske or auto NASCAR. Been heartened to see the scene of so many people back in the seats again. And yes, Joseph Newgarden finally put together the lessons learned from the race that he and I had in Houston about 10 years ago. All of that learning finally paid off in an IndyCar championship. So congratulations to the newest, greatest American. Wait. And hopefully IndyCar is able to capitalize on his victory. But he and I did have a go-kart race on a high-speed go-kart track south of Houston about 10 years ago. And I still passed me like he did Marcus Ericsson. I was able to hold him off. But watching a professional race car driver, even on a go-kart track, was very impressive. But I did one time in my life race an IndyCar champion.
Okay, so that answers the question that I had, which was, did he know that it was a race?
Yeah, well, you know, I think he did because he did his best to leave me behind. And like I said, he didn't lap me. So that's the positive. I tried to stay in his tracks. I tried to follow his line the best I could. He never got out of sight, but man, it's amazing to watch, even on a go-kart track. And at the time, he was like a 21, 22-year-old kid. He was driving for Sarah Fisher Racing and on his way up, and you could tell he was going to be a star. But it's just amazing to try and stay in the tracks and have no chance to pass a guy like that. So that was one of the great moments of my sporting life.
So when you say high speed, though, what speeds are we talking?
Oh yeah, 50s probably.
Oh, so this isn't Champions Fun Center. This is legit go karting.
No. This is not. This was serious go karting, and he was seriously good.
What makes him special? Because the people who watch Drive to Survive, you see these F1 drivers, practicing their braking and practicing. Just all these little ins and outs. Racing seems so technical. Were you able to get a sense of that from racing with a guy like that? Just how technical and how perfect a guy like this is, from millimeter perfect on his turns, down to the millisecond in terms of their braking. Yeah.
Absolutely. You try to stay the line, and you can just sense where that a guy like that knows exactly where to brake going into it. And just everything about it, and it was only a matter of a couple of races that we had that day, and I tried to follow it. Even it's just something that comes with experience. But it was fun. It was fun to meet him when he was a kid. It's been great to follow his career, and like I said, he is the newest American racing hero, and I hope capitalizes on what he did, and him going into the stands to celebrate, that was a cool moment. So anybody who's a race car fan ought to be celebrating the Indy 500, the scene that it was, the fact that Newgarden won it.
I'll just say, with them being on the same weekend, I would much rather watch the Indy 500 than Monaco. Monaco, if you're an F1 fan out there, it's not the same as what it once was. But, Bill, I'm thinking that in another life you could have been an IndyCar driver.
That wouldn't have bothered me any. That wouldn't have, but Houston used to have a couple of Grand Prix, on back-to-back days, actually. Much like they'll have this weekend in Detroit. They had back-to-back races around the Astrodome, actually. And one year it was a thrill, but it was also a thrill. I got a chance to do a documentary on A.J. Foyt and meet the Foyt family and Larry, and do a lengthy sit-down interview with A.J. Foyt, and go out to his track or his shop out in Keller, Texas. So for a guy who's followed IndyCar racing for about the past 50 years, and A.J. Foyt was as an iconic American hero when it comes to racing and sporting life. To meet him, that was a thrill. So the Indy 500 was great this week, and it was great to be able to cover it 10 years ago.
Bill Doleman's with us here, his usual Friday spot. It's Hail Varsity Radio. Bill, we're going to switch gears, talk some football here. And the news of the day has been from the Big 12, as Commissioner Yarmack saying that they want a coast-to-coast conference. He feels that Big 12 leadership is unified in their front in terms of what they want from expansion. They've already added a Florida school and UCF. They've gone down to Houston. They've gotten BYU, and rumors are out there. I shouldn't forget about Cincinnati as well, but the rumors out there in the past couple days that Colorado may be the next to jump ship and head off to the Big 12, and maybe add 3 or 4 more schools on top of that from the Big 12's perspective. What's your reaction to the Big 12 trying to become the next coast-to-coast conference, trying to retain their status as a power conference?
Well, that they went out and they got a marketing guy, much like the Pac-12 did, and it appears this guy is going to be much better at his job, and at least, marketing is a power, conference. It still is not going to be the Big Ten and the SEC. It's just not. When the Big Ten expands, it goes to get an iconic brand in Nebraska 10 years ago, and then it goes out and it gets, the D.C. area with Maryland, and the New York area sort of with Rutgers, although nobody cares. But then you expand and you have USC and UCLA, right? I mean, those are major, major brands, and the Big 12 is going after UCF, BYU, Colorado. Nobody cares out there. They will for one day in September. But they're trying. And I really think what you're going to have is the Power 2, then you're going to have the Big 12, a next tier below, competitive. There's no question it's going to be competitive, but iconic, it's not going to be iconic, right? I'm sure they're going to add Colorado. Utah will probably follow suit. They'll renew the BYU-Utah rivalry, which will be significant. Maybe they get the Arizonas, and who knows, maybe San Diego State. If they want to go out to Southern California and grab the Aztecs. I suppose if you have UCF, you might as well get San Diego State. To me, they're the same thing.
Well, that's the definition of coast to coast, then.
Say again?
That'd be the definition of coast to coast if you got Florida and Southern California.
Right. Yeah. But you have schools that are all kind of the same ilk: Cincinnati, Houston, UCF, San Diego State, BYU. All of those fit in the same kind of character, the same kind of mold. But they're not UCLA, USC, Nebraska, for whatever it's worth, Maryland, and the way the Big Ten has expanded, and whatever the Big Ten wants to do next, and whenever that's going to happen, who knows? They've got to get that TV contract sorted out. But whatever the Big Ten's next move is, it will trump anything that the Big 12 does to try and label itself as a coast-to-coast.
So having said that, Bill, with your experience working in TV, what's, as a preemptive move or planning out their next steps, if you are right now in charge of expansion in the Big 12, give me 3 markets that you would want to go to or hunker down in order to either get an extra payout from the Big 12 or Big 10 or SEC if they want to poach said school, or just good markets to have in there in order to expand the Big 12 brand?
I think for them, the rivalries will be important. So that's why, the Pac-12 tried to force, Colorado and Utah together as a rival. Well, that was as natural as Nebraska and Colorado, in the Big 12. But I think if they can go, they'll get Colorado in all likelihood. And again, I still think that people in Denver don't realize that they are actually in the Pac-12 right now. But I think if you go get them and you bring back Utah, and you renew the rivalry with Utah and BYU, that would be a huge move, bigger than probably the Big 12 realizes. That rivalry is just flat out hatred, and that'll be good, for the conference to have that as intense as it is right off the bat. And you put that on an iconic type of day, in November, up against anything that the Big Ten might have or the SEC might have, that would be huge. And then the Arizona schools, I think, would also be healthy.
Bill Doleman's with us here at Hail Varsity Radio. And Bill, in the era of conference expansion, feels like every conference, if they aren't there already, is soon to be a 16-team conference. It just feels like the way the world is moving. Do you think it's fair that the SEC is keeping an 8-game conference schedule moving forward, at least in 2024? They say they'll reevaluate for 2025, but I don't see any reason for them to change unless there's any real pitfalls with sticking with 8. And right now there isn't. They still get a spot in the college football playoff regardless. You get one tune-up game in November to get your team healthy. That's what the SEC's done for a while. That's what they're going to continue to do moving forward. What's your reaction to that in the era of conference expansion when it feels like the SEC and the Big 10 and the Big 12 are all going to be 16 schools soon? That, the Big 10 and the other power conferences, they got 9 conference games, but the SEC remains at 8. Do you have a reaction?
I think that's for the time being. I think maybe ESPN having an SEC contract. I think that's significant, right? But I think eventually there's going to be a governing body over the college football. Maybe the college football playoff is the governing body, and they just call it something else like College Football Association 2.0 after what it was. What was that? 30, 40 years ago. But I think eventually there might be something that says, look, we really need to unify this. Everybody's got to have 9 conference games, and maybe that will, whenever the next iteration of TV contracts are up and whatever anybody's willing to pay, I'd be surprised if the SEC can continue on with that. I think at some point they're going to have to go to 9. In the meantime, every hyphenated directional school in the South is going to be a lot richer for it because they'll all get scheduled by all the powerhouses, and they'll play a lot of those weak sister games to pad the schedule and pad the record.
Hey, Southeast Missouri State deserves a brand new volleyball facility just as much as anybody else, Bill.
Exactly.
Well, and Bill, this might be regressing a little bit, but I want to ask you straight up in terms of like the Big 12 and expansion and going out. Is Colorado at all as attractive of a brand as it is now without Deion? Does he need to be there to make it happen?
They had to do that to have relevancy, and they'll have that for however long he is there, or for however long people are still enamored with him. The fortunate thing for Deion Sanders in Colorado, I guess, is that if things don't go all that well, either right away or eventually, which I think most people predict that the luster's going to eventually fade, they'll get overwhelmed like they always have been by the Broncos. And if Sean Payton has any sense of semblance of success there, that'll overshadow anything that Colorado does. Even if Deion Sanders does have success, for the most part, they'll still be overshadowed by the Broncos. So yeah, they have him now. They're relevant. They're talked about. If they start off with a loss at TCU and then they lose to Nebraska in week 2, they're going to be praying for that NFL season to go well because people are going to lose their shine for Coach Prime.
Bill Doleman's with us here. It's Hail Varsity Radio. Bill joining us from Florida. And Bill, we're going to let you get back to the sunshine and the warm weather. We appreciate you taking a few minutes out of your Friday, though.
All right, guys. Great to visit with you. Go Big Red.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
It's Friday edition Hail Varsity Radio. We're presented by Currency. Elijah Herbel and Brady Oltmans with you here today as we're about to get into some recruiting talk. Another big recruiting weekend for Nebraska. Some big-time visitors. Matt Rule back on campus after spending some time back out in North Carolina. We'll get to that in just a second. But first, a reminder, if you've missed anything today, you can catch it all in podcast form. That is wherever you get podcasts, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Podcasts, Google Play, really wherever you get your podcasts from, you will be able to find Hail Varsity Radio. Search it up. Leave a like, leave a review. It's what pays the bills. We do this show for you. So if there's anything you'd like us to change, anything you'd like us to do better, leave us a comment or a review, and we will get around to doing that. It's a show by the people for the people.
Yeah. If you got something to say, please message it towards Elijah and Chris. Leave me out of the mentions, please. I don't need that in my life. Yeah.
Also, you can check out what you missed today. As I just laid out, you heard from Brady Oltman, Bill Doleman. Man, it's one of those days, Brady.
Hey,
I'll tell you what.
It's Friday.
We did just hear from Brady Oltmans, so we also heard from Bill Doleman. You can catch that in podcast form. Back in hour one, an extended sit-down with Jacob Padilla talking Keisei Tominaga, as well as Trey Alexander and his NBA comparison, kind of, for Josiah Alec. It was my NBA comparison with Jacob being like, yeah, man, whatever you say.
You kind of pushed him over the line there, Ward.
So if you missed that moment, you can check it out in podcast form as well. Shortly following the conclusion of this show is when we'll get it posted. But Brady, let's get into recruiting. Another big recruiting weekend for the Huskers. I think the top names on campus this weekend, Mario Buford, Caleb Pyfrom as well from Omaha Central, and, Matt Rule. After the reports were out there that Matt Rule wasn't even on campus for the unofficial visits last weekend when Carter Nelson was in town, him and Satterfield not in the facility. As for today, he was giving a commencement speech in North Carolina before returning back to campus today. Fill us in on that.
Yeah, so I believe that he was giving a commencement speech at his son's school. His son had just graduated from Carolina, and he went out there, and then at the time, I thought, okay, well, then that's weird, but good for him for spending time with his family. And then Mario Buford sends out something where it's just him and Coach Rule, and Rule still got his full suit on from underneath the gown that he spoke from. And it's, hey, props to him. Those jet miles that were worked into his contract, they come in handy for times like that. But they want to make that June 23rd weekend that priority recruiting weekend. But to be honest, this is a really impressive, good first weekend of June. And in the game of recruiting, you kind of want to be the first through the door, or you want to be the last place people stop at. And a lot of them, June opens up. This is going to be their first stops. I think it's they're hosting one of their recruits is having his first ever official visit while he's on campus here. And then you look at, in addition to the two that you mentioned, Mario Buford, good standing with Nebraska. Caleb Pyfrom, good standing with Nebraska. You got Peyton Weiss also from Texas. In addition to, I got down in my notes here. You've got Dante Carter, Carlon Jones, William Nettles, all from Texas. Those Texas ties are really coming in handy that first week, and it builds a little bit of momentum. Danny Kaline also says that he's going to stop by this weekend to kind of peer recruit a little bit that he can. So it's a big step forward as that calendar turns into June, and Nebraska can kind of get moving on that 2024 class a little bit more.
Yeah, and that was the thing I really noticed, that this weekend's got a big Texas flair. You got names from Pflugerville, Texas, DeSoto, Texas, Mesquite, Texas, Bay City, Texas, Steele, Texas, just all over Texas is on display this weekend, and it's something we've talked about plenty on this show of Matt Rule trying to reopen that pipeline down to Lone Star State.
Yeah, Carlon Jones is interesting because he comes from Bay City, same place as Bryce Turner. There's your Snapple fact for the day. That was Nebraska's first commit under Matt Rule was Bryce Turner, the speedster receiver who's going to be who's on campus now. So
that'd be at bar trivia in 10 years.
Yeah, exactly. So write it down now, y'all, and then point to it, circle it, put it on your calendars. The one that still stands out to me is Mario Buford, because I've talked with his head coach, Claude Mathis, a couple of times. Great, highly reputable coach. DeSoto won the state championship this last year, and he talked about how Mario, he doesn't play quite like Marquise, his older brother, who's the safety on Nebraska's roster still. he kind of plays his own game a little bit, but he saw not only in skill set but in growth and development from the mental side of things. Mario was a big vocal leader on last year's team that won the state championship, and for winning the state championship in Texas is impressive, and especially for DeSoto, still like a powerhouse program, but still, I mean, you're getting everybody's best shot, and you're at the biggest classification of Texas high school football. It's a big deal. So he talked to me about how Mario's game elevated, and Mario loves Nebraska. I mean, he respects it because his brother goes here still. But he talked about how Nebraska, under the previous staff, reached out and stayed in communication with him. And then in the coaching change, they still, talked to him, kept lines of communication. When Matt Rule and his staff come in, there was no lapse in communication whatsoever. Rule and his staff kept lines going and kept communicating, kept bringing Mario in for more visits, and now he's coming in for an official visit this weekend. Basically, as far as I know, it's down kind of between Nebraska, Michigan State, and Penn State. Mm-hmm. He wants to take official visits to all three before he makes a decision, so he should have time to fit all those in June if he wants. A little bit of camp time might make it somewhat difficult on a schedule, but Nebraska's in a really good place with him, and you could potentially see him kind of add another one to the Buford name and reassure up that defensive, that secondary with another 4-star recruit here before the season kind of gets kicked off.
I've heard this even described as a 2-horse race between Nebraska and Michigan State. How realistic is that interest in Penn State, do you think? Because Buford, I don't think he strikes me as the kind of guy that's going to be waiting until into his high school football season to make a decision. I think he's the type of guy that's going to make it through his official visits and decide shortly thereafter. I could have the wrong read there, but for my outsider, you're obviously much more well-connected than I am. It felt like Nebraska and Michigan State. So tell me about the Penn State factor there and how realistic a shot each of these schools has.
Well, I think Nebraska's on the inside track, not to use a horse racing analogy or to please Bill Doleman while he's down in Florida with his racetrack analogies, but Nebraska's certainly in a good spot. He likes Michigan State. I think he had a good visit there in January, I want to say, is when he visited there last time. He likes the direction of that program. The staff there kind of really built up a good communication with him, I'll say. And then what stands out about Penn State, I believe, from just kind of hearing chatter and kind of hearing his thoughts on it, was the environment. He likes that environment that Penn State provides. He even specifically mentioned, the whiteouts that they'd have and having Happy Valley all painted up in white. And that's a rabid atmosphere, and players want to play in that. To that point, Nebraska clearly, fills up Memorial Stadium with a sea of red, and it's a recruiting point. You can point to that and say, hey, we're gonna get you there, and you've got a 90,000 people that are going to support you in that. And to be honest, I think that's going to be one thing that Matt Rule and his coaching staff are going to key in on. They know what to expect, but it's going to be that that first home game. That's going to do wonders for them. They're going to not only just having the social media clips and everything recorded down, but each one of those coaches are going to tell you and recite the goose pimples and things that are growing on your arms and just the embodiment and feeling of playing at a night game at Nebraska, because that first one is going to be a night game, and just what it is playing in front of the sea of red. I mean, it's one thing to show them a Twitter video, but when you're talking and describing it to kids as they're watching it, it leaves a whole different feel. So that's going to be a big thing for this coaching staff moving forward is conveying that and getting that familial atmosphere from the fans.
So we mentioned the fact that Mario Buford feels like he's on the home stretch of his recruitment. Another guy feels like he's on a similar track. Caleb Pyfrom from Omaha Central, big kid, 6'5" frame, 300 pounds, and the recruitment has been less hot and heavy than a guy like Mario Buford, but it still feels like this is a guy that's ready to, I don't want to say ready to announce his college spot, but he's getting to that point where I feel like there's a lot of momentum towards Nebraska's way with Caleb.
Yeah, it's almost strange to me because you think back to November and it was like Caleb was going to be the next big target out of in state. I think at that time he had Iowa and Iowa State was in on him.
Minnesota.
Minnesota. You had those regional powerhouses that were coming after him, and maybe part of it you chalk up to the coaching change that just nothing really resonated with him about Nebraska. But this coaching staff has clearly made it known to him that he's a priority and an effort. He sees himself playing at Nebraska. He really likes Coach Donovan Raiola. He likes and of course, all of the offensive linemen there at Nebraska now love him. Shout out, Aaron Sorensen did a feature in our yearbook about the entire offensive line and the brotherhood and what they're building here in year 2 under Raiola, year 1 under Rule. And it's really interesting. It's something that the recruits really rally around and really identify with. So you see that now working its way out in the recruiting trail. They've got a couple of line commits. And I think, Caleb, it would almost surprise me if he waited to commit until the start of his senior year. He seems like a guy that, especially you get him on kind of peer recruiting with a couple of guys this weekend, it might be sooner rather than later that we get a commitment out of Caleb.
Are we saying possibly a commitment by the end of the weekend, or do you think he's got other stops to check out first?
I think at this point, why not, write it out, take all your officials. Not to say that you can commit and not do all the official visits. You can still do that. I just think it's a busy schedule with the visits and camps if he's going to camp. But I don't know. I'd be surprised if it waits until into July. I'd say probably by the end of the month at least.
Mm-hmm. Let's go to Carter Nelson, Brady. It feels like we have this update every single week whenever we have you on for the recruiting update.
Hey.
Carter Nelson's going to be back in Lincoln June 23rd after the unofficial last weekend. But this weekend, he's in Georgia. It's a Georgia team that just picked up 2 tight end commits, and they're not afraid to go after a whole bunch of guys from the same position if they see the talent any given year. But another recruitment that feels like the winds are blowing in the way of Nebraska.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm pleased to be the recruiting expert and 8-man expert around in the state. So happy to be that guy. But yeah, Carter's just one of those guys that it speaks a lot. He's made a couple of these like almost impromptu stops, like the unofficialist of the unofficial visits. Like he was for Ainsworth's girls, I believe it was, played in the state tournament, or he came through during the state basketball tournament and just like stopped by the Memorial Stadium, chatted with him while he was in Lincoln, and like that means something, you know what I mean? Like I know that part of it is proximity and part of it is like the benefits of having an in-state kid that you can just pop on over while you're at the state basketball tournament or whatever. But he just had a really impromptu stop while Satterfield and Rule were out in the Carolinas moving their families and moving their homes back over to Lincoln this last week. And like there it was, just a couple of like recruiting staffers, maybe a couple of other coaches, and then Danny Kaline comes in and they just chat each other up. And Danny does that before he goes off to the quarterback camp. Just I don't know, that I think when you sit back, a lot of these recruits talk about the family atmosphere, and Rule and his coaching staff want it to be a familial atmosphere. They like to build that. And I don't know, what's his family like? Hey, I'm going to be up here at this time. And then Danny says, okay, sweet, I'll stop by. Or, hey, I'm up in town. Do you mind if I stop on by? Sure. You know what I mean? Like, sure, like it's tough to compete with the Georgias. It's tough to compete with the Alabamas. You just can't. If you're Nebraska on a results scale, you can't do that. And him visiting there at the recruiting behemoth that is Georgia is impressive, but these are the benefits that are going to work to Nebraska having that in-state talent. And boy, I can't emphasize enough how big of a get that would be for Nebraska building momentum going forward if they can get a commitment out of a 4-star tight end, number 2 tight end in the country.
There's our Friday recruiting update with Brady Oltmans. When we return, we're going to get into the Hail Varsity Yearbook. You have till Sunday at midnight to guarantee your copy. We'll get into that after the break on Hail Varsity.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Pulling through a Friday edition, it's Hail Varsity Radio. We are presented by Currency, Elijah Herbel, and Brady Oltmans with you here on a Friday as we just got the recruiting update from Brady Oltmans, a weekend of official visitors for Nebraska. We'll be getting an update, I believe, every Friday from Brady for the rest of the month, as it's a huge recruiting month, the month of June. Official visitors every single weekend for this Husker football team. So we'll be keeping our finger on the pulse with that, courtesy of Brady Oltmans. Brady, while we're here, it's actually funny how this timing worked out. I'd like to think it was intentional, but it wasn't. That the Hail Varsity Yearbook cover released on the same day that I had you in here doing a show with me. Like, I wish it was intentional and it was planned, but it was one of those things where about 2 hours before the show, I see that pop up on Twitter and I go, oh, that's too perfect. Like, it's a whole segment we can fill right there. We can talk about the yearbook.
Yeah, fate is the best scheduler of them all, to be honest with you. I mean, it rolls off the tongue like that.
Like, I knew it was coming. I knew the yearbook cover photo was going to get released and it was going to be a big party. And then that happened and I went, I look like the smartest man alive. Like, the bosses are going to love it. They're going to be like, oh, you brought in one of the writers on yearbook release day. Look at Elijah being a team player. If the bosses are listening, that's totally what it was. That is exactly what I did. I brought in Brady here on yearbook release day intentionally. If you're just a listener out there, this was happenstance, and it's worked out beautifully. But, Brady, it's always an exciting time of year whenever the yearbook goes to print. I don't want to call it the crown jewel of Hail Varsity's yearly endeavors, because really every issue can be considered a crown jewel, but this is one of the ones that if you get yourself one copy of Hail Varsity every single year, the football yearbook is a great one to get previews of every single team in the Big Ten, some in-depth feature stories. I'm really excited to read this piece on Gabe Ervin. Just tell me a little bit about what went into making the yearbook this year. It's always an endeavor, and now I'm sure there's a weight off your shoulders now that's going to press.
Yeah, absolutely. Brady Oltmans and Elijah Herbel here at Hail Varsity Radio. It's honestly, I love it so much. I mean, it's a lot of hard work, but it's really fulfilling, and I'm going to be really proud of it, as I think the entire staff will be once it's done. It's been a lot of hands on deck. It's not fully sent off to print yet, so there's still some hair pulling at times, but there's going to be great, thoughtful features. Every single position has some sort of breakdown to it, like minutia, like the entire position as it looks as a whole, someone who's on the rise in said position, little things to keep notes of, numbers to throw out there either from last year or potentials, things to keep in mind for this upcoming year. The big features coming off in addition to the Gabe Ervin feature. Aaron Sorensen has that big feature on the offensive line. It's well documented what that offensive line went through last year. Matt Rule has said, look, nobody's more bought into this program than the offensive line. They're pouring everything that they have into this thing, and they're going to make sure that they do everything that they can to please Husker fans and to get this thing turned around. We talked to all of them, talked to head coach Matt Rule about that. Jacob Padilla, who joined us in hour one, did a whole story on the willingness to move to different positions. That's a big part of Matt Rule's staff, and Matt Rule himself has a history of moving positions throughout his playing football career. So we've got a lot of interesting things there. Drake with his Gabe feature, and then me personally, I wrote about the Texas connection. It touches base with a lot of the staff connections, but it mostly features down on Dr. Susan Elza and assistant tight ends coach Bob Wager and wide receivers coach Garrett McGuire. I think all of those features are going to turn out great. And then a little nugget, instead of the calendar that we usually release inside it for every yearbook, this year we're doing a kids yearbook instead. So it's going to come with a how-to guide of how to punt the football from Byron Buccini. Took some time. Chief Borders did we'll tease that one out a little bit because that's going to be a lot of fun to see people look at that all at once. But he tried a new sport, and we're here to show you how to also try that sport with him. There's also going to be activity guides, spot the difference between these photos through a couple of our Hail Varsity photographers, pledged some of their photos for that. So it's just going to be a lot of fun. I'm going to be so proud once it's done, as again I think the entire staff will be. It's still a lot of work now because it's not completely done, but I'm really proud of it, and I'm really hoping that people can enjoy it once they get their subscriptions.
And we need to get to that sit down with Matt Rule here in just a second, but you mentioned Chief Borders trying the new sport. That's been his off-season theme from his TikTok account. I've had some fun following along with that, and there was one earlier this year where Jessica Gardner, who's on the track and field team of pole vaulter, she's garnered herself some TikTok fame of her own. She tried to sit down with Chief and teach him how to pole vault, and it was so funny to see because this is a guy that looks like just a superhuman athlete. That's what the football team is, but then you get into the nitty-gritty of it. Athletes are built in different ways, and that dude was not made to be a pole vaulter in any way, shape, or form. And I remember back in high school seeing the pole vaulters do all their crazy activities, and it's just interesting to see a guy that like Chief Borders is more athletic than I will ever hope to be in my entire life. Yeah, even that guy can't do a pole vault. It gave me a little bit of hope. Maybe I'm more athletic than I give myself credit for.
Yeah. That's the takeaway, Elijah, is you're better than you think you are out of this. Well, and I will say to that point, though, as we kind of walked through, we got pictures and did a step-by-step thing of showing him how to also do this thing. The staff of people that kind of helped coach him along showed him how to do something, and he did it on the first try. And it was to the point where Eric, the photographer, got a picture of it and showed Chief, and he was even surprised by how great he did. You know what I mean? And it got everybody kind of fired up. So it's super cool, and he did a lot better at that than he did at the pole vault, or even than he did at all the gymnastics ones that he did, jumping in on the gymnastics practices. But I don't know. It's also really cool to just see how much fun and how not. There's just the willingness to jump in and try something new, and it gets across the humanity that these young people go through. You know what I mean?
That's the best part of the yearbook every single year is it allows you to put a story to a face or a name. You see these guys in the football field and you see them as football players, but this yearbook really gives you a chance to see these guys as deeper than that. They're all as you said, they all have a human side to their story as well, and this yearbook gets to dive into that a little bit further than any run-of-the-mill Hail Varsity story. Not to downgrade, but it's just the time that it has to be invested into a story like this. You get to give these stories their full due in a time like this, and the yearbook's awesome. But quickly, I need to get to the sit-down with Matt Rule, because we've had a chance to meet him, the media, through press conferences, through the introduction, and through little mini things in spring. But it's different whenever you get a chance to sit down with a guy one-on-one and really get a sense for who he is without spoiling anything that's going to be in the yearbook in that sit down. Just tell me a little bit about what it was like to sit down with Matt Rule and get some time just to chat with him and really figure out who he is as a person.
Well, yeah, our sit down was about 40 minutes in total as a part of the Q&A, so we will have a full Q&A in the yearbook with Matt Rule. It was interesting because we talked with him about I think it was the afternoon after he spoke to the Lincoln Chamber of Commerce and had that whole speech. But you sit in there and, somebody's at Adidas is shipping him a whole lot of Adidas to wear around, like different, I'm talking like a pyramid of shoes stacked up in one corner of his office, but his entire office, it really says something. His entire office is built up in pictures. Behind him is a picture of him and his family, and prominently. There's no real like trophies or anything like that. Like placed prominently is a picture of his family, and then dotted all over the place is like pictures of players and people who care about him, like phone pictures, but he had printed out and blown up. It was really interesting. Like one he's really proud of is a picture of him getting a sack when he was at Penn State. That one picture of him, and then right above that is from competition week with him flat on the ground at the ice box and his face down on the ice. So it was like a little humble, a little bit of checking yourself on your way up. But he comes across as a really genuine guy. I mean, he's deeply philosophical. There were a couple of times where he was like, please stop me if I'm going and talking up too much. And we're like, no, please talk as much as you want. But he's a really thoughtful, sincere person. I think some of the questions that we asked about philosophy and about building the team went over well. And I think that comes across and people are going to be pleased when they read it.
Again, you have till Sunday night at midnight. HailVarsity.com/offer is where you go to get yourself a monthly or yearly subscription to Hail Varsity magazine. Guarantee yourself a copy of the yearbook. We'll wrap up a Friday edition of Hail Varsity after this.
And now,
back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Wrapping up a Friday edition, it's Hail Varsity Radio. We are presented by Currency. For all your equipment financing needs, go Currency. Elijah Herbel and Brady Oltmans with you here on a Friday, as Chris Schmidt will be back tomorrow as he joins us from the lobby of his hotel in Kansas City, 7:30 to 9, the weekend edition of Hail Varsity Radio, as we'll get caught up on some of the top stories from the week. Schmitty was out Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday of this week, so I'm sure he's got plenty to talk about. If I know anything about Schmitty, it's I know that much time away leads him to really miss this job. So we'll hear from Schmitty tomorrow morning, as well as Hail Varsity managing editor Brandon Vogel. We'll get some thoughts from him on the yearbook and the week that's been before Gary Sharp checks in for his usual 8:30 time slot. Again, you can catch that live streaming the Hail Varsity YouTube page at HVarsity Radio on Twitter, as well as where you can find those shows, or we'll post up the full version in podcast form or without the commercial breaks on Hail Varsity's YouTube page. So a lot of great chances to watch that Saturday morning edition of Hail Varsity Radio. Start your weekend with us, Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel, Brandon Vogel, and Gary Sharp. Again, that is tomorrow morning, Saturday, 7:30 till 9 a.m. Brady, it's been a lot of fun having you in here today. Like we got to do this more. We got to kick Schmitty out to the road. I know a lot of baseball for him this summer. Like the Elijah Herbel and Brady Oltmans summer experience could be fun.
Hey man, we got to think of a better as summer break. Doing the summer break with Elijah and Brady.
The summer break. We could do something like with baseball, or we'll brainstorm.
Yeah, we can talk about it because we're keeping it light and breezy. It's a nice little fun adventure here for us. Before
we get you out of here today, though, let us know what's coming up from you. The yearbook almost to print. I guess I jumped the gun a little bit there last segment. Almost to print, so still crossing your T's and dotting your I's. What else is coming up from you this summer? I know you've been having a lot of fun with your eye test podcast. You and Eric Francis have been doing a great job with that. You're obviously going to be keeping your finger on the pulse of recruiting. Let us know what's coming up from you.
Oh, man. Well, in addition to recruiting and camps, trying to find out like fun stories to do or a little bit off the beaten path stories coming up this weekend. In addition to Jacob's big Josiah Alec film study, I'll have a story on the the 2017 game between UCF and Temple when Scott Frost faced Matt Rule, doing a deep dive into that game and seeing how that turns out, and also looking at eventually looking at that Big 12 championship game that Baylor fell just shy of against Oklahoma in overtime, looking at kind of big games chronicling Matt Rule's career, while also hopefully getting a couple of thoughtful features on people pieces and then some camp access, a little bit more immediate stories that way. So we're going to try to pepper in a little bit of something. If you subscribe, you're going to be happy you did, because there's going to be a little something for everybody there.
Yeah, and what a great time to subscribe with a new coaching staff coming into Nebraska. A lot of learning to be done about not only scheme in football, but who these guys are off the field, and you have a great chance in the Hail Varsity Yearbook. Again, you can stay caught up with all the work Brady gets done at Brady Oltmans on Twitter is where you find him, BradyOltmans. If you're not good at spelling, that's how you find him, at Brady Oltmans on Twitter. That's where he posts up his most recent stories and what he's working on. So, Brady, it's been awesome having you in today.
Yeah, man. So happy for you to reach out and to be here. This has been fun. Shout out Jacob, shout out Bill for joining us. It's been great, and we hope you enjoy your weekend as much as we're going to enjoy ours.
One last reminder, get yourself a discounted subscription to Hail Varsity magazine, hailvarsity.com/offer. You can pay how you want, monthly or annual. Get yourself a few dollars off, save yourself some money, and get yourself a guaranteed copy of the Hail Varsity Yearbook. You can check out this full show in podcast form wherever you get podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, or Amazon Music, as well as the Hail Varsity YouTube page. We'll chat with you tomorrow morning, 7:30 to 9, the weekend edition of Hail Varsity Radio. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel will be joined by Brandon Vogel and Gary Sharp. We'll talk to you in the morning.
Ow, ow!